There is a Graham Stark statistic in Charlotte, North Carolina, that if you are born black here, that in fact you'll die. And I found that to be true.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Journey to Freedom podcast. I'm Dr. B, your host. I'm just, as we think about where we're at in this time in history, just excited about a whole bunch of possibilities. And I have a special guest on today, Kenny Robinson, and we are going to chop it up about a lot of things today. I don't know when you're listening to this. Right now we're in the middle part of October in 2024, which has been interesting in this election season. If you're watching this in 2028 or 2027, you probably heard about this election season and just how there is as I watch some of the news channels, there is a lot of talk about Black men. And our place in history right now, and what our belief systems are, and the fact that they act like some of us don't know what we're doing, or how to talk, or how to express ourselves, and that we've been forgotten. And one of the things that is super important to me is just letting people know that we understand our history. We understand, many of us do, some of us maybe don't. I'm going to take a group of men down for a civil rights tour into Alabama in January. As I think about some of the folks that I've had on this podcast, and I say Kenny, I'll say I'm the luckiest man here because I get to learn from everybody. But we've had some pretty special people that have been on that kind of have a handle on who they are as men, who they are as Black men, who they are as far as their faith. We came out of a time in the, through our pandemic where there was just a lot of introspection into where do I belong and how do I fit in. And then I hope we can talk about that today a little bit. But I think for those of us who have a handle on that, we're doing pretty well at starting to share with others. And I think that's been one of the things that we may not have done a good job with, is just expressing who we are to each other. And, we've had some great talks, and I don't know, I like to call them barbershop talks, where, growing up, going to the barbershop and all the things that we talk about, and how we learn from a kid to being a teenager to being an adult, and those associations and the men that we hang around with. And I know, we're not a monolith where every one of us is the same. We come from different places. I grew up in Colorado, which was definitely different than I'm sure it is in North Carolina, in the South. And then you think about the North, and, our country is different because we're different. But what's neat is we can come together, we can talk. I was at an event, it's called NARAB, which is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. It was started in the 40s, where before Black men and women could be in real estate associations, we weren't allowed to be. And so we started our own, and it's been around since then. And so I get there, and we have a session called Man Up. And there was about 150 of us, Black men, that just kind of came together and started talking about some of the issues in our society. And that's what the Journey to Freedom program is all about. It's about talking about the best of who we are, and sharing each week or each time we do one of these about what we can do to be better. What does that journey look like? That it hasn't, it's never going to end. We will always be searching for what it is that can help us to be the best that we can be. I asked Kenny before we got started, recording, what he was excited about. And he said, I'm just excited that I was able to get up today start another day, and be able to make a difference in the world that we live in. And so thank you for being on, Kenny. Thank you for taking time out of your day, taking time out of your, the things that you do on a daily basis to talk to us. I know there's some exciting things that you do, but I would love to start with your story. Maybe you can tell us where you came from, what it is that you did in life to become and create the identity that you now hold for yourself, that then helps to serve others. So I'll let you go ahead and get started, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you for having me on today. My name is Kenny Robinson, and I am the founder and executive director of Freedom Fighting Missionaries, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm 45 years old, which makes me a kid in the 80s and a teen in the 90s. And as a Black man, my story is common for those who came through the 80s and the 90s, being separated from parents due to drug addiction, raised by grandparents, and originally from Hempstead, New York, located on Long Island in New York, shipped to the South in hopes of saving my life and giving myself an opportunity. Once my father was incarcerated and my mother was battling the disease of addiction, and lived with my paternal grandmother who raised me the rest of the way. So that's a pretty common story. 13 years old, started selling crack. Father at 15 years old, 5 children by 21, headed to federal prison by 23. So that's not an uncommon story across the United States of America for those of us who came up during those times, and all of the trials and tribulations that we can attribute to the crack cocaine epidemic and how it impacted Black families across America. So everything else in and around in between, you can pencil in, because again, it is not an uncommon story. It's in fact a very common one. I spent 10 years in federal prison from the age of 23 turning 24 to 33. Released to Charlotte, North Carolina, where a lot of my family had relocated to by the time that my sentence was up. And I decided to come here for an opportunity. This is the biggest city in the state of North Carolina, with over 2 million people in the greater Charlotte area. Had hopes of not a Black job, but a felon job, right? Which is, more difficult to attain than a Black job. And a felon job is like washing somebody's car, holding a flag on construction, some of the most basic menial minimum wage jobs that one can think of, and told to pull myself up by my bootstraps, missing the boots, right? So, I had real high hopes of turning my life around, being able to provide for myself and my children. But unfortunately for me, Charlotte, North Carolina at the time was one of the worst places in the United States of America that you could be poor, Black, have a criminal background, and have any hopes of upward mobility. There is a grim, stark statistic in Charlotte, North Carolina, that if you are born Black here, that in fact you'll die poor and Black here. And I found that to be true upon my release in 2012 at 34 years old with 5 children in immediate need, searching for employment. And after 40 interviews and 40 no's in a row, I was able to obtain a job at a Goodwill, making $7.25 an hour, while still in the halfway house, who was taking 25% of that gross income. And, pretty much left up to my own devices on how to figure it out. I did work at Goodwill for about 6 months. I never did give up, though. I had some supporters. I visited every nonprofit that you can think of in the Charlotte area, looking for help. And many of them would say, take the forklift training, we get you a forklift job, take the flagger training, we get your job in construction. I did all of those things and none of that didn't pan out. And just as I was nearing giving up, right, after a year out, I've tried everything. Nothing didn't come through, struggling with simple things like obtaining an identification, getting proper health care, employment, and then housing. I was ready to give up and go back to whatever I had to do to survive and to be able to provide for my children, who again were in immediate need. Immediate need means things like tampons, lotion, food. It's picture day, right? My oldest daughter was 7 years old when I went away in the second grade, and 17 graduating high school when I returned. So I had a lot on my shoulders, and I had lost all pride at that time, having been told no so many times, that I finally was able to beg my way into a car dealership as a salesman. And beg my way means literally down on bending knee, begging a white man in the middle of a showroom dealership for a job opportunity, right? Down on my knees in front of the shoppers that was there shopping for a new car, begging a white man for a job opportunity. He lifted me up, gave me that opportunity, and within 6 months, I became a top salesperson there. Within 2 years, I was promoted up to finance manager and sent to Houston, Texas to finance school. Went from minimum wage to well over $100,000 a year inside of 2 years. 2 years from that, I was promoted up to sales manager, working for brands like BMW, Honda, Mazda, and Chevrolet, and able to get all of my children through high school. Those who wanted to go to college had an opportunity to do that. And in 2019, after realizing that I had hit the glass ceiling there, right, they're not going to let me own the dealership because, in fact, less than 1% of all the dealerships in the history of the automobile have been Black owned and operated, right? So it wasn't like I was going to become the owner of a dealership. And although I was making 150,000 plus a year, drove a new BMW every year, had good credit, could have purchased a home anywhere in the city of Charlotte on that income at that time, I decided to retire from there and start my own reentry organization, given my own success story along that journey in the dealership. People were reaching out to me on social media and saying things like, Kenny, my mom is getting out of prison. She's been in there 12 years. My neighbor's child, my nephew, my son, my daughter. If they can just have an opportunity like you had, then, they can be successful. They're smart. They're articulate. They just need a shot. And after experiencing that, I went to the owner of the dealership and pled to him to hire more people with the background. He did that. We hired over 12 different individuals. I trained them, supported them. Many of them are managers and homeowners now across the country. And I became known in the community for being able to not only assist someone with a background and a career, but to provide mentorship that would allow them to provide for their families generationally. So I took that experience and started my own reentry organization in 2020, Freedom Fighting Missionaries. And, 4 nonprofits, reentry organizations and second chance opportunity nonprofits are on the lowest rung on the ladder as it relates to nonprofits. Everything else is above that, including domestic violence, chronic homelessness, substance abuse, the climate, animal shelters, right, are above those that are exiting jails or prisons and seeking a second chance. And me being formerly incarcerated myself and Black, trying to advocate for a population of people, for the most part, who can't even vote. So you can imagine no funding in that area, no care, no concern, and a community who at that time were oblivious to the obvious, because we as Americans are always under the assumption that we pay taxes. Surely our tax dollars are going to a program to provide assistance, and people like Kenny just choose to commit crimes, choose to be homeless, and do not want anything better for themselves. When in fact, it's the opposite. There are and there was little resources available for second chance opportunities, specifically for those who are Black and brown in our communities. And I, of course, experienced that firsthand. So I had a journey on my hands trying to educate the community, educate the government, and educate banks and foundations to provide support in this area while going through a pandemic, shortly after going through George Floyd and protests, where we were out on the street assisting individuals who qualified for a stimulus check. Everybody was supposed to get one. But what about the person exiting prison after 15 years who doesn't know how to use a smartphone? What about Joe, the panhandler, who hasn't had an active address in 10 years? Who's going to sit down with him with a laptop and assist him so he can get a stimulus check, so he can get food stamps, so he can get housing? And that is the work that we started out doing in 2020. Of course, utilizing our own dollars, our own time, two masks on with a laptop connected to Wi-Fi on our cell phones, and we were able to build up the organization by advocating to city council, to county commissioners, to banks, to foundations, to the community, that this is a population of people who deserve just a regular opportunity, just like any other American, having served their time, having went through the court system, and having been deemed free. Right. So you take my own personal story as it relates to voting, because that is one of the top issues here. I completed my sentence in 2012. I had 3 years of paper probation. I completed that, and at that time, according to the law, I was eligible to request my certain rights to be restored, including voting rights. I took off a day of work, went to the courthouse to file the paperwork to do that. No one wanted to help me. In fact, I had been the first person to even request to have my voting rights restored in 17 years. Um, after battling with the court staff there, refusing to leave, nearly getting arrested in the courthouse, they did process that paperwork, and I was able to get my rights restored, which made me eligible to vote in the 2016 elections. I went through such a journey doing that and had such a hard time that I wrote to the president of the United States. Barack Obama was still in office at that time. And I wrote him a heartfelt letter and explained to him all of the difficulties that I had while trying to exercise my right to vote, all of the struggles that I had went through trying to rehabilitate myself and provide a meaningful pathway for my family. And miraculously, he did write me back and thanked me for my advocacy, my work, and encouraged me to keep on pushing and to utilize my one vote to impact the lives of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of people just like me across the country. And I did just that, advocating to the local government in the state of North Carolina to loosen some of those restrictions on obtaining the right to vote. We were successful in that policy work, which then made it so anybody that is released from incarceration, having completed all probation or parole and don't have any restitution or fines, would automatically be able to vote. So now that law is on the books. So people don't have to go down to the courthouse and do the things that I had to do in order to gain their right back to vote. So fast forward back into 2020, we're out there in the community doing the work, trying to advocate for funding, and miraculously was able to receive funding to do that by advocating to the behavioral health care system in 2021. I pled to them, presented to them that if you are Black, have a criminal background, and are a Charlotte native, that in fact you have a disability equivalent to a one-armed man or a blind man, right?
Wow. Yeah.
That in fact you could get employment, but only a certain kind, and you could get housing, but only a certain kind. You could get health care, but only a certain kind because you have a disability. And I explained to them that the difference between me and the blind man was that the blind man had somewhere to go. He could go over there to the place for the blind and they would help him. But you take a person exiting jail or prison, had nowhere to go that was meaningful, that can get that person on a track to being able to support themselves, considering their disability. And the behavioral healthcare system heard me on that cry for help. And they are the ones who funded us first, starting us with $100,000, followed by $75,000, which allowed me to formalize our program to focus on 4 basic need services. Those basic need services are still intact, and they are providing identifications and vital records. Don't worry about nothing if you don't have an ID, a social security card, or birth certificate. Right. Secondly, from there was healthcare. Don't worry about a job or housing. You don't even have your insulin. You'll get the job and pass out if you don't have your medicine.
Mhm.
Right. And there's something that if we can take a look at you now, Kenny, we can prevent this condition that's surely going to happen if you don't have preventative care. Right. So I advocated successfully for that. And then employment, skills training, and most importantly, for people who had experienced long term incarceration, employment etiquette. Right, which is how do you behave in the workplace? What does the word onboarding mean? What is your tax bracket? Right, Kenny, you can't look at her that way at work. You can't say that to her here. Right. So all of these things I went through the hard way, and I learned them and was able to teach them as part of our program. And the fourth basic service need and the most difficult was housing, right? Because I've got a job, I've got an identification. In fact, I have health care, but I have no place to live in a place of my own with a lease in my name. And nobody will rent to me because of my background. So what am I to do? I live in my car, live on the streets, increase the chances that I'm subject to become a victim of crime or commit a crime because I'm homeless. Every statistic and every data point will point to a person being homeless is more likely to commit a crime or become victim of a crime. So we formulated our program into those 4 basic needs services, went out to advocate for funding in this work, and set out to assist others. We were able to successfully do that. And in January of 2022, we were awarded $750,000 from our local county government to support our reentry program. We became the first reentry program in the history of Charlotte, North Carolina to receive Section 8 housing vouchers that are specifically for justice-involved individuals.
Okay.
I created a network of property managers, landlords, apartment complexes to partner with us to provide housing for the families that we served. Utilized all of the data that we were collecting to advocate to the Urban Institute to create a data report for us that was specific to
Mhm.
housing. And they created that report. I'm a reviewer on it, and it stated that 83% of Black men released from incarceration face homelessness. And I was armed with that report and able to go out in the community and advocate for additional funding. I then struck out to develop my own housing so I wouldn't be at the behest of the property managers and landlords. Miraculously, the city of Charlotte heard my cries and they awarded us $2 million, with $1 million being used to purchase land to build my own housing development. Mecklenburg County stepped back up with a grant of $1.75 million to take care of pre-construction costs and any horizontal costs. And we are now building our own housing development, brand new apartment complex, 24 units to provide housing for the families that we serve. Um, Again, when someone doesn't know the work that we do, you can think justice involved is pretty much Black men. However, we serve 65% women and Black women with children who have a barrier to housing and upward mobility due to a background that's mostly shoplifting, wrote a bad check, simple assaults, and these things are preventing these families from being moving forward. So that is our focus. So from 2020 till now, we have successfully raised over $10.5 million. Went from a one-person team of myself to now a staff of 9, including 3 master-level social workers. My salaries alone yearly are over $500,000 for my employees. We provide 100% free healthcare coverage for our employees and have become the biggest reentry organization in North Carolina that's founded and led by a Black man with a background. Along the way, a lot of other journeys and successes. We are going into our 4th annual gala, which will be January the 31st. We were able to secure and book none other than Dr. Angela Davis as our keynote speaker for our next gala. So a lot of exciting work done over here at Freedom Fighting Missionaries. It is very difficult work. It is time consuming. It is traumatic. It is stressful. However, we have the prayers of all of our supporters and our family, which encourage us to keep moving. Last year, we assisted 167 families with housing, 32 of them coming from complete unsheltered homelessness and are now in permanent housing with the lease in their own name. So that is the short version. We are everywhere on social media: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. You can Google now Freedom Fighting Missionaries. You can tell Alexa to who is Freedom Fighting Missionaries. So there's a ton of news stories. I've done over 30 news stories, been featured on Fox News, CNN, all across the board. So that is some of the work that we are doing, and in that, becoming a community leader, bringing other grassroots organizations together, serving on multiple committees and boards throughout the Charlotte area, and becoming a voice not only for those who are justice involved, but for all of those experiencing poverty. Where Dr. B, I had, initially set out to serve this population and stay in my lane there. But because the work has been so impactful, we shifted over to serving humanity, right? Because people facing trials and tribulations coming out of poverty, whether they were leaving incarceration, whether they were returning from a war, whether they had went into the hospital with 2 legs and came out with 1, right? All of those kind of populations needed a voice to advocate for them. So we have been that voice here in Charlotte and have now been able to assist thousands of individuals and families with our services.
Wow, thank you for sharing. And I know when we think about all the things that could happen and all the things that your life and the trajectory your life could go, I'm sure you're not missing selling cars right now, right?
No.
Yeah, and when we think about our cross and passing, and I here in Colorado where I'm at, I was running a homeless services organization, and in the building next to me was a gentleman named Hassan Latif, who is doing a lot of the reentry stuff that you're doing. He's now put together several different projects, housing projects, where where he's had churches that have been able to build second chance homes on the properties of the churches, and he's fighting with the Colorado Department of Corrections all the time on rights and when folks come out and, where they go. And so I know the work is hard. I know the work is in many cases not rewarding. I know I can remember as I have, a food bank and I have, clothes and that kind of stuff, and having to help, former inmates try to find the stuff and how hard it was, okay, I'm going to help move it without us owning or having a special arrangement, fighting with, in the case of 2020 and the pandemic, when we're fighting with, even before that, we're not going to allow these folks to come to stay in our housing and stuff. One of the questions I love to ask, so I just thank you for the fight. Thank you for continuing. Some would say you're an outlier, right? You weren't destined with your background to do the things that you've been able to do. What do you think set you apart? I know there was the 10 years where you were incarcerated, that a lot of thought happened, a lot of education probably happened in your mind. You get out and you have this tenacity, you have this perseverance, you have this belief, and it had to be tough, that you're going to be somebody. What do you think that was that separated you from the other folks that got released probably the same month you got released, and their lives never took on the same trajectory that yours did?
Yeah, and I attribute that to persistence and determination alone. Um, when you look at it in a human aspect, when you look at it in a spiritual aspect, I had the prayers of my grandmother who prayed for my future. She prayed for me when when he gets 20, when he gets 30, when he gets 40, and many others were praying for my success. But prayers is one thing, faith is another. Taking that action step, right? Considering those things, and that's what I did. Persistent and determination alone. Right. And Calvin Coolidge said that that's omnipotent, right? That if you can be persistent and you can be determined, that in fact you could achieve anything. And I believe that. I studied the book, The Secret, and I cast out things into the universe, and I posted them up where I can see them. Right. And every no that I got just meant that I was closer to a yes. Right. The book, The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino, is a Bible to me. Right. And to this day, I listen to it every day. I studied it. I've almost memorized it. Right.
You greet this day with love in your heart, right?
That's correct. So, given all of that, 1 out of 10,000 of us, Black men or women, right, being that persistent, being that determined, have already overcame many obstacles just as difficult as I faced, right? But do I expect the greater population of Black people with exiting incarceration or with a record to be able to get told no 40 times in a row? No, right? So I knew early on that I had a responsibility not only to my family but to the community, because of my will to keep on pushing in spite of being told no and no and no. And I did that, and that made all of the difference in the world, because I could have quit after 38 no's. Right, where would I be now? Right, where would my children be? But I knew that according to what I just stated, that just around the other side of that corner was a yes. Right. And would I have to give up my pride to do that? Yes, I did. Would I have to be determined and pushed and willing to learn new things? Yes, and I did. And, here I am today being able to share that same message with now thousands, hundreds of thousands of others across the country.
What this brings into my mind, and you can maybe share too. When I think of our forefathers and the people who came before us, and you said 1 in 10,000, and I think of, after visiting the Bryan Stevenson Museum and seeing what the African slave trade was like, and saying, okay, 1 out of 10,000 probably made it here. right? That made it to the country, that were able to work and to move forward. And then, as a result, we took the best of the best, and they figured out how to, our slave masters figured out how to breed us, I guess, for a lack of a better word, to make better versions of ourselves. And then we start seeing, 200 years later, we're watching the best of the athletes in the world. We're watching, when I watch a football game yesterday, I see, the result of the best of the best being able to move forward. Then I see somebody like yourself and some of the other folks that have that, because you say, you have the perseverance and the determination that comes from somewhere, right? It's not like, why doesn't everybody have it? It's not like something you can put in a bottle and drink it, and all of a sudden you have determination and perseverance and taking 38 or 40 no's, and the willingness to read the right books, the willingness to get around, and we'll talk about associations here in a second, around the right people. But if we fast forward another 200 years, and we have a whole bunch of folks like yourself who come together and are talking and having these conversations and working on this journey of freedom, what does our society look like when the best of the best are the determination? Is that something that now is just part of who we are and what we teach our kids, and how we how we move forward? And then, and in today's world, how do we teach this? Do we say, okay, if you want to learn from Kenny Robinson or from his organization, you have to be willing to do this, 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 and this? And then do we just take the people who are willing to do it, and what do we do with the folks who are not, or until they're ready? Just, I know I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but, part of my purpose is helping people become the person they need to be in order to do the things that God put them on this earth to do. And so it's taking somebody who has that tenacity and has that goal and that dream like you had, and then walking them through, and then they have the prayers behind them, they have the people behind them, and then they get to take off, and because you are 100% working in your purpose. What's your thoughts about how do we move forward into this journey, helping people become people like you, I guess, people that are willing to move forward, do stuff?
Well, we have a duty
Mm-hmm.
to reach back to community when we learn something, right, and share that, right. That's what this country was built on. Right? Outside of systemic racism and all of the many atrocities that we can point to throughout American history, right? One thing that has kept this country intact is that in the time of a trial or tribulation, in the time of war, in the time of a natural disaster, right, in the time of need, Americans have an amazing will to put everything else to the side during that time and come together, right? So we have a duty to do that. And as Black men in this country, we have a duty that once we obtain any type of success, to reach back and to help one another. It's unfortunate that we face the crack cocaine epidemic. It's unfortunate the many things that have happened to our people, right? But there are some positives there. And in those positives, right, we have a duty and a calling to go back. When I was in the dealership making $150,000 a year with perfect credit, driving a new BMW, I could have just went on with my life and still been a success story, right?
Yeah.
But I felt a duty and a calling, right? And many of us do, including yourself. It's just an act on that, right? And it is now up to men like me and you to say, when you feel that calling, you have a duty to act upon it, not just for yourself, your family, and your community, but for the United States of America, right? Which we're not going anywhere. We're not getting shipped anywhere. There's no place for us to get shipped to. We don't have a home country to return to. This is our country, right? And if we wanted to be standing 100, 200 years from now, right, then we have a duty to keep it intact, right, to work together outside of our differences in culture and race, right, and prepare a way for our children's children, right? So that duty calls for us to look beyond the Black community, right? To look beyond race and gender, right? And say that we are a people of the United States of America. And if we don't hold true to that, this country won't be standing in 200 years. And we don't have to worry about
It's true.
where Black people have traveled from since the slave ships into that time. And again, like I stated earlier, when you see the things that we have seen, it supersedes race and gender, right? And it moves over into humanity so that we can stand on a true democracy, not only in this country, but around the world.
I love the word duty, and it makes. I just finished writing a book. It's called The Decision Formula, where I take 5 steps that to make a decision that can change your life. And I'm feeling like, there's a part in there where I talk about having the right disciplines to be able to do it. I talk about enjoying the journey to be able to do it. I talk about whether there's decisions that are reversible or irreversible. I talk about a God factor in there. What I didn't talk about is a duty. And it's so important that what is it that's in you that says, I have a responsibility, more so than Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, but it's literally a responsibility to make a difference and serve. Can you talk to me a little bit about family and the power of family and how important family is to not only the Black men, but to all of us?
Well, I am a father of 7 children, 5 girls and 2 boys. 5 of my children are grown between the ages of 24 and 30. I am also grandfather to 9 grandchildren. Right. My father was one of 10. His mother was one of 14. Right. So strong family values are embedded in my DNA. That's something that is very important to me. Um, and every day I think about my children and my family, right? Who they have given the greatest sacrifice for the work that I do, right? I'm busy, I'm on calls, I'm not always available. And it is them that are sacrificing me, right? Their dad, their granddad, their brother, right? Their nephew, so I can go out here and do the work that I need to do for the community. So without their support, right, without their understanding, then I'm nothing, right? Um, my uncle, one of my uncles, he always told us, as we were growing up and throughout life, that we have the ability to choose our friends, choose our wife, choose those who we associate with. But God chooses your family, right? Chooses who you're born to, right? Chooses who your brothers and sisters are, right? And the same thing, given that spiritual basis, we have a duty to family, right? Because we didn't choose them, they were chosen for us. So that is one of the most important things to me, right? If I would say, all right, well, what are the things that are most important to you, Kenny? Right? Then I would start with God. Family would be second, right? Now that I've been through this journey, right, I would have to say, well, my self care, right? It's important that I take care of myself and my health, right? Even before community, right? So, God, family, self care, community. See, work is down there towards the end, right? Because without those preceding things, work and progress and materialistic things, and none of that stuff doesn't matter if you don't have a source of knowing where you came from. You don't have a sense of a family. You don't care about yourself, right? You don't have a community to embrace you and to support, right? And then if you don't have, a job and a job with purpose, right, where you can feel like you're giving back something to be getting something. So that is my stance on family.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And it's as a family member, right? I'm like you. I have 8 children. I have 16 grandkids now, and they're everything. They're the reason, you know, uh, that I get up in the morning sometimes when I think about it. But for those of us who maybe don't have this family unit that supports us, that cares about us, that we haven't built in. What's the first step that somebody can do um, to be a good family member, not just have a family? You know, I talk to, when I'm having these conversations, we have a lot of conversations about what it means to be a dad, you know, and folks that haven't been able to, you know, be with their kids as they were growing up. And, you know, like yourself, you said your daughter was 7 when you know, were incarcerated, and 17 when you got out. And so, you know, you didn't have that opportunity during those 10 years. I'm sure you've taken advantage of that opportunity since then. But one of the things that I said is it's just as important for those kids to have a dad as it is for me as a dad to have those kids, because then I get to do stuff like protect and support and encourage and, you know, help them find their path. What are those steps that we can take as men to be a better family, be better at family, I guess?
Well, one of the things that we as men have fell short at, right, is sharing these experiences and sharing them in an intimate way, right? Certain things I don't know until someone shares that with me, right? So along this journey, I have had mentorship, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have been able to learn from those who came up in a two-parent household, who didn't experience the things that I experienced growing up in the epidemic, right? And look like me, right? As black as I am, right? But they didn't have those experiences, right? But they shared them with me, right? And helped me to get a better grasp and understanding of what true family is, right? And that family um, is beyond and more than just sharing the same bloodline, DNA, and lineage, right? And that again, we have a duty that once you learn these things, know these things, to share them with others. And that's what that means to me.
Oh man, that is so good. What? Let's talk a little bit about associations, because and from the books we read, whether it's an Ogmandino book, a John Maxwell book, Magic of Thinking Big Book, some of the ones that I know you've probably um, you probably talked about or probably been able to read. How important is associations and the people that we're around in our ability to succeed? I think I lost you're back. Your ability to succeed in life. And how do we build those relationships?
Well, see, I came again from a world of sales,
Mm-hmm.
right, where relationships were and are important, right? And I did not, and I do not, I don't mind calling you 100 times, right? Emailing you 200 times and following up from there. Dr. B, I tried to reach you at 12. That must not be a good time. I'll try you back at 4. Or I tried you at 9, right? So I built up a network of people, right? Understood that people like to be greeted in a certain type of way, right? And people like to be respected, right? And people like to be heard. And although I have trained and become proficient at speaking, I'm a better listener than I am a speaker. And given that, I've been able to form partnerships, relationships with many people across many spectrums, from Joe the panhandler to a billion-dollar philanthropist, right? Um, and able to not only speak in layman's terms, but listen in layman's terms, right? And I have used those connections to build up this organization, to find compassion for those who have no voice of their own, right? And be able to speak for those that, are voiceless. So my associations and relationships extend out of the hood, right? And on over into banks and foundations and over into government and education and to healthcare, right? And that is one of the most important components of the work that we do. It's forming collaborations, partnerships with others who they may not look like me, right? And their last name may end in a vowel instead of a consonant, right? And understanding different people's journeys and culture, and and joining them as part of the family. So associations are a big part of the work that we do.
You brought up self-care. And when I think about health, I think about the physical health, but more importantly, probably the mental health, because the mental health is what allows you to do some things to have physical health. What do you do in order of all the things you got going on, all your priorities, running a multi-million-dollar business, 9 employees, all your kids, your grandkids? How do you make sure that you're taking care of you in order to be able to do all these things?
Well, one of the most cliche things that you can say is breathe.
There we go.
So
But really breathe, right? Not just
right, but really breathe.
okay.
Right? Not just the natural reaction of taking a breath, right? But to breathe, to pause, right? My grandmother used to tell me we was ripping and running in the streets and stuff. She used to tell us all the time, you ought to sit down and rest a little while, right? And in the scriptures, it says that you ought to sit down and rest a little while. The creator of this place, for those who believe, said, on this day, I rested, right? So I've taken all of those things and said, first of all, I need to breathe. Secondly, I need to rest a little while, right? I look at myself in the mirror, right? And say, okay, well, you ought to stretch, right? You ought to eat some vegetables. You ought to drink some water today, right? You ought to take a walk, right? Leave your phone at home and take a walk in your own neighborhood. Just take a walk, right? And listen to the birds, right? Take the time to just stop and outside and just listen to the birds. Just listen to the wind as they, blow through the trees, right? Take your shoes off and plant your feet firmly, right down on the earth and the ground, and just rest for a little while. And if you do that, all of the other things of self-care will fall into place, including mental health, which is one of the things that we struggle the most with in our community and have had little care in that area. That's changing now. But again, once you have these experiences, once you know these things, you then have a duty to share them with others and in a way that they can understand.
Yeah. Wow. What's next for Kenny Robinson? You've accomplished so much. You're making such a difference in North Carolina. Is there a national thought to it? Is it how do we take what we've done, duplicate it in other areas? Or is it, hey, we're just going to take care and do what God has called us to do right here? What's the future for you?
Well, for me, being ready to take that next step, right? Having all of the faith in the world, but ready to put that into action by taking the next step wherever the Creator has me to go and being willing to do that. That's the only reason that I'm here doing this now, because I am busy. If nothing else, this is an hour of my time I could have been speaking to one of my children, right? So what's next for me is to continue to do this work, right? Continue to answer these calls, right? Continue to not get so big that I don't have time for Dr. B. Right? Podcast with Charlemagne the God, right?
I know, I love it.
Whoever it is.
Yeah.
So next for me, like I said when we first got on this call, wake up, right? And be appreciative that your eyes opened up, that you took a breath, and then being willing to get up and put your shoes on and put one foot in front of the other and go where the day will take you, knowing that there's going to be some shifting, there's going to be some changes, right? Every day is not going to be a sunny day. Surely it's going to rain, right? Surely it's going to storm. But to look at that rain and storm and say, we need this rain, we need this storm, right? And look at everything that's positive. So that's what's next. That's what's next for me, and I truly believe that everything else that I'm purposed for in this life will fall into place from there. And then again, I have to be the one that's willing to get on the plane and travel,
Mhm.
right? To get on the stage and speak, right? To roll up my own sleeves, right? And do the hard work when necessary. And that's where I stand on that.
Absolutely. What did I not talk about that you may have wanted to share with the group and the audience, knowing this is going to be here for a long time? You know that this we recorded it and it's going to go out there. But what would you want somebody to know that we didn't get to talk about today?
That we're speaking as adults. Adults will mostly listen to this, right? But there's some invisible people in the room, right? And those invisible people are children, right? Who need somebody to stand up and advocate for them and speak for them. That is why we at Freedom Fighting Missionaries have shifted our housing focus to justice involved individuals to focus on children who are experiencing homelessness in public schools, and they have a parent or caregiver whose barrier to safe, affordable housing is because of a previous background, right? That we ought to speak up for those invisible children and provide a way for them so they can have housing and be able to go to school with a full stomach, right? And given all of the opportunities that they need to properly learn. I can remember being hungry in the second grade at school, right? Hard to learn that way. Right. Hard to learn when you're 13 years old and you've been evicted for the third time, right? And see your mother or your caregiver struggling. So I would like the listeners to know and understand that, again, this word duty, right? You think, well, what can I do? Right. There's something you can do, even if you just speak up, speak up. We always say that it only takes one person to stand up in the room and say, this isn't right. Right. And when you do that, you encourage other people to stand up behind you and say that this isn't right. Right. So for the children across America, across the world, right, who for nothing that they did on their own, who are suffering, who are homeless, who are hungry, who are looking for a way, you and I must be the ones to stand up and say that this isn't right and encourage other people to stand up on their behalf as well.
Man, that is so good. Thank you for being part of this. I when is your gala? Because I want to make sure I come.
January the 31st, 2025. It will
Okay.
be held at the Westin Hotel here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay. I
Um,
think I'll be in Alabama that week, but maybe I'll jump up for a minute and
yeah,
weekend and see what I can do because
it'll,
it's close enough, right?
it'll be great if you did. We are celebrating women in the movement this year. So it's all women on the program this year. And again, keynote speaker Dr. Angela Davis, who you can't just want to have her and she's coming.
No. It's just, yes, you got to be doing something
Yeah,
that is in her what she wants to support, and so
yeah,
that's so neat. And I definitely want to talk to Santu. I want you guys to get together, but it has been such a good time that you spent this time with me. I hope it's not, our last time. I hope our paths get to cross again. I am a better human being with all the notes and everything I have because I got to spend an hour with Kenny Robinson. And so I want you to continue to do the things you're doing, continue to follow what God has for you, continue to follow what, your family and your friends and the people that are around you, they have served you well. And I just, definitely want to encourage you to continue to take care of yourself, continue to breathe, really breathe,
yeah,
because there's many more years. And, when that calling's on, when I say that there are outliers and there's people that are separated and are going to make the difference, not just today, but hundreds of years from now. So thank you for being persistent. Thank you for being, diligent. Thank you for not being distracted and being willing to humble yourself and be vulnerable and to put your knee down and say, I need help. Please help me. I need this job. I need to step up. I know I can do this. Allow me to do that. And if all of us can continue to take that on, we'll be better people. So I appreciate you. I thank you and look forward to talking to you on the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Go ahead and hit the subscribe and the buttons or bells or whatever it is, because this has been an amazing, incredible interview, and we know we'll have many more as we continue to do these. We'll talk to you guys soon. Don't forget, you're God's greatest gift, and He loves you if you allow Him to. We'll talk to you on the next one.